What if I told you that you could design and live the life that you want on your own terms? Would you do it? Would you take a leap into the unknown? Or would you settle for a life of limits, a life of safety but lacking true meaning? Zeph and Moses Blacksburg here, and I'm on a journey to help you ignite your inner passions, let go of your fears, and get more out of life. Will you join me and make this year your year of purpose? Welcome to the Year of Purpose podcast. Zeph and Blacksburg here with another episode of the Year of Purpose podcast, and today I have the great pleasure to introduce you to Maggie Patterson. Now, Maggie is a communication strategist who works with entrepreneurs and corporations to help them craft intelligent communication strategies that boost the bottom line. With 15 plus years in experience, Maggie has worked with big brands and solopreneurs and has run her own successful communications agency for nearly 10 years. She's the host of the Marketing Moxie podcast, and her work has been featured by Entrepreneur.com, Virgin.com, and the Huffington Post. Maggie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing super great. I'm happy that spring is getting very close. I know we were talking about how the weather's kind of up and down, but I see the sun is out right now, and things are definitely getting warmer over here.
Yeah, us too. I'm just hoping that this is it and there's not some big surprise snowstorm Easter weekend or something.
Me too. So I wanted to bring you on the show today because one of the big things that you talk about is the art and science of stories and storytelling. And so I think that this is a valuable piece of information, a valuable tool for pretty much everybody, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. I think that you connect with people on a deeper level if you're able to tell your story the right way and to get your message across. So how about we just get started with, tell me about the art and science of stories and why it's so important in our everyday life.
Here's the thing. If we just look at it from a science perspective, I could probably have a 20-part podcast series of just talking about the science behind storytelling. But I think what we really need to know when we're telling stories is that there's an actual psychological reason our stories work. And that's why when we hear a story, we kind of lean in, our body language changes. All of a sudden we're more engaged. And when you're out and you see two people sitting at the bar and they're totally magnetized because they're talking to each other, they're telling stories. They're not reciting facts. You look at storytelling as this pattern. It's a pattern that we are conditioned from birth to recognize. We learn pattern, we learn numbers, we learn letters, we learn colors, shapes. Stories are the exact same thing. You think back to all the years ago before we have verbal communication, we still use stories, cave drawings. So when you actually tell a story, something different happens in the brain. When we're talking in facts, about 2 parts of the brain activates. When we talk in stories and we share stories, multiple parts of the brain get in on the action. And you think about someone's talking to you about movement. All of a sudden your motor cortex is going. Someone's talking about something happy. The part of your brain that processes one of those different receptors. I can't keep them all straight. There's too many. But something different and magical happens in the brain. So when you use stories instead of facts and try to appeal to people's logic, that's what really gets them. And that's why when you see really great, compelling presentations or videos or TEDx talks or whatever it is, they're using a story. Because a story is what makes us human. And everyone has something interesting to say, even if we don't think we actually do.
So is this why, and this happens to me oftentimes when I hear a story, is this why I can almost see it happening in my head versus if I'm just watching a power presentation of, first you do this, then you do that,
Yeah.
And I'm just staring at the screen like, what is going on?
That's totally it. And what's really interesting is there's this entire idea that when you hear a story, you make it a positive association generally. And then with that positive association, what it does is it lodges in our brains. And then it becomes part of our imagination. And then eventually, if it's been hanging out there long enough, it just becomes part of what we know. So we no longer have any objections to it. It's all of a sudden it's become factual information we use in our day-to-day lives. And if you can engage that versus 53% of people say, oh, it makes a huge difference in how we remember it, how we recall it, and how we actually connect with the person and associate with them.
So you had a great example there of how we can use it with the 53% idea. What are some of the ways that we could take advantage of this, whether it's just, meeting a random stranger in a store? Because maybe that talk turns into, oh, they become my client somehow.
Yeah.
So how can we kind of leverage this storytelling factor to just increase all of our experiences, or at least benefit all of our experiences with other people?
So, in just kind of a day-to-day going about your business, it's going to depend on your personality. Are you introverted? Are you extroverted? Are you someone who loves to really, really talk a lot? Are you someone who's more guarded? But I always say to people, there's two things you can do. Number one is, instead of just kind of reciting factual information, find a way to ground it in the experience you had. So like a lot of times, I'm a mom, so I will talk about something my son did. And that's something very human, very relatable. Stepping on a Lego. You're going to remember, oh, Maggie's the girl who keeps stepping on Lego, and, she's having these moments about Lego. Or, quirky facts. People remember quirky facts. I'm Canadian, so I make fun a lot of the fact that, like, maple syrup in our house is like a major commodity. I just got 2 new bottles yesterday. But, I mean, that's the fact that I love maple syrup. You're going to remember that more than I really like, this book was kind of awesome. No, you're going to remember the fun, kind of quirky, different things that people always remember. You want to make sure that those are real, genuine things. I mean, I really do genuinely love maple syrup. I genuinely love gardening. So those are things I talk about. So just bring through your personality a little bit. You don't have to be so like mechanical and guarded. And even if you work in, a corporate position, you're still allowed to have a personal life and a personality in that position.
So the maple syrup story is going to work way better than the 53% story most of the time, or probably all the time.
Unless you have like a robot person, in which case you don't hang out with them anyways.
Right. So how about this? So the people who are great at talking in general, I'm somebody who will randomly say something to someone in the store. Perfect stranger, I'll joke about whatever, right? But some people are introverted, like you said.
Yeah.
How do we overcome that fear? Because obviously we're missing out on something by not telling our story or not opening up to other people. What can we do if we are quieter most of the time?
So this is something like I personally am, I'm an INTJ. I get it. I've learned to be extroverted by necessity because I chose a career in communications. So you can't really be quiet or all those extroverts will take over. But I think, you need to operate where you're comfortable. So if you're not someone who's going to turn over in Barnes & Noble and start talking to the person next to you, you don't have to do that. But maybe you're going to find opportunities in small conversations or small networking events where you can have deeper, more intimate conversations that are going to serve you better. I know for me, like I personally, throwing me in a huge room, I'll just like totally shrink back. Whereas if I'm in a group of 3 or 4 people where we can have a genuine dialogue, I know I'm going to do a lot better. So try to line up opportunities for yourself where you can be successful and you are going to be more comfortable. And the other thing is too, like just have to remember that it's a skill. It's a practicing. When I started doing any sort of public speaking, I used to be so nauseous and sweaty. Like I almost failed my persuasion class in college because I couldn't get it together to do my speeches. So, it's always going to be an improvement. So just push yourself a little bit more. If you've never done something, don't think you're going to be amazing the first time you do it. It's a lot of practice and building your confidence.
Right. So taking small steps here and there, maybe
Always.
Talking to people when you're in a smaller group. That's something that I get to. I can't really go to a networking group of 100, 150 people and just like walk up to a random stranger. Oftentimes I will actually do that, is I'll find the groups of 3 or 4 people that are standing around, and I'll just kind of stand there and look really lost, like a sad puppy, until somebody kind of turns and is like, so what do you do? Who are you? Why are you just standing here watching us?
Exactly.
But it works out really well. So there are ways to take advantage of, being in that big group scenario and opening up to a smaller group within that. Along with telling a story, sometimes, so growing up, we learned to have a filter, right? Like you don't just go out in public and say, something crazy like, my kid wrote all over the wall today in permanent marker. Like you just don't tell random people that. And perhaps there are other things that we want to tell people that we really shouldn't. So how do we determine what needs to go in the story and what needs to stay out?
So this really comes down to two things, is listening. You need to really listen before you can tell stories. And I think that this is where someone who's a little more on the introverted side has a definite advantage, because you're able to say, oh, okay. You're able to take their information and make a better judgment call about what information you should be telling a story about, what kind of information you should be sharing. The other thing I think is too is just really kind of trust your gut. Like if your gut is going, I don't know if I should say that, maybe you shouldn't. You should really kind of get attuned. And I'll see this a lot. Like, I work a lot with online entrepreneurs, and it's very in style right now to let all your dirty laundry hang out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now I will never do business with you because you seem flaky or unreliable. So, be authentic, be vulnerable, but be selective. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't talk about, on Thursday I was crying. Like, no one needs to know that. You don't want to do business with a crying person. You want to do business with the person who has it together.
Exactly. And so I actually have a really good friend of mine right now who we're working on actually writing out her story, because I feel like when she has spoken a few times, she leaves out certain details that I think could allow people to care more about it. This was something that I hit when I was in college. I produced a feature film. This was something that was probably my most proud accomplishment while I was in college. And there was this 118-page script. It was written by a fraternity brother of mine, true story about his mother passing away. And I read it and I'm like, wow, this is a really good story. But when I turn this into a movie, I don't know if people are going to sit there for 2 hours and say the same thing. And we had to go back in and try to figure out how to alter it without embellishing what actually happened, so that people cared about it more. So are there certain things within our stories that influence people to care more about what's going on? Because you were saying a lot of different receptors in our heads fire off. Like, for example, if I were to describe to you, I'm a rower. If I really started to describe what it's like to be rowing in a boat, you'd probably understand this misty spray that comes up off the water and the smell of the harbor, because it's kind of gross sometimes. And, you could probably sense that in your mind. So how can we encourage people through our stories to see what's going on for us?
It's so hard. I think that here's the thing is, as humans, we're really, really inherently selfish. So there's always kind of that little ticker that goes through the back of our head that goes, what's in it for me? So, and it's this idea, it's a psychological principle of implicit egoism. So if you're telling stories, you want people like them. So it comes back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago, is that common ground. So maybe I haven't rowed, but I used to play field hockey. And hey, maybe there's a connect. Oh, we're going to talk about the early morning practice. I can identify with that story in some way. Whereas I think sometimes the challenge is, if you have a really big story, like, it's so hard sometimes for people to identify. Like, and I always talk about like the rags to riches story. Like, I don't have a rags to riches story, so I'm not going to tell my story. Or, wow, that's so outrageous. Like, I can't even begin to understand that. So I think you need to kind of parse your stories in a way where people can find that common ground with you, and you are tapping into that like factor, so they can at least start there before you drop them into the middle of the epic story where they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about with your friend. They don't even know what to do with that. And you've all of a sudden made them uncomfortable. And when they're uncomfortable, they can start to recoil from you.
So let's not drop them in the eye of the storm just yet. Let's kind of throw out some of the details and make sure strategically that they're ones that people can start to relate to, even if they've never been in that experience before. Is that right?
Yeah, I would warm people up. There's a reason, and you know this from film. I mean, there's a reason you don't start with a battle in Star Wars with Darth Vader. Like, Luke, it does not meet Darth in the first scene. You need to warm people up. So kind of think of that story as the angle is going to go up till we reach the exciting, moment, and then we'll have the climax and then the resolution. Don't just start at the climax. So you're going to mess people up.
Right. It gets them too excited off the bat, or not even excited because there was no build up, and then the story just crashes and burns, I feel like. So let me ask you this though, when you've been doing this for quite some time now, did you ever have a point when you first got started where you were afraid to tell your own story?
Oh my gosh, yes. Completely. So, I mean, I've been running my own business for almost 10 years, but I would say for the first probably 8 years of the business, I mean, I was doing my work and I was very successful, but I wasn't doing it really fully as me. And I realized that at a certain point, like, I'm like, I think turning 40 kind of tipped the scales and I kind of went, I don't care anymore. Like if I'm working with a corporate client and they can't handle that I'm the kind of person who's going to drop an F-bomb in a blog post, I don't really care anymore. And I think that there's just, at that point, it was a matter of being comfortable in what I was doing and being confident in it. At the same time, though, like I was, there's just that little part of me that was being held back. And I think that you just kind of need to be able to sometimes just let it out, let that freak flag fly. And now I work with clients who totally get me and appreciate me for that. So, the storytelling is always going to be an evolution of getting more comfortable and confident and moving along that spectrum. You probably aren't going to watch this and the next day and be like, I'm going to tell you everything. Story is iterative and always going to be evolving.
I like you said, let that freak flag fly. Is that what you said?
Yeah, let your freak flag fly.
That first of all, that's a tongue twister. But second of all,
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool way to go about thinking about yourself and what you're sharing with the world. Is just let it out. I mean, don't go tell them all of your deepest, darkest secrets. But like you said,
Exactly.
not being afraid if you have to drop an F-bomb in a blog post. If they don't like it, then obviously like that's who you are. So you want people who are going to follow who you are. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, like in my own career, I really feel like when I first started out, I spent so much time because I looked young, and I was inexperienced trying to be something I wasn't, like because I was in a position of authority and my clients needed to know they were secure. So they got to see this very narrow view of me. And then when I started freelancing, I had to present the picture of the perfect consultant that you would pay me this money and it would be very reliable. And now I'm just kind of like, yeah, I'm here, I'm experienced, deal with it. But I mean, that took 15 years.
Yeah, no, it takes a long time. It's not something where you're going to go to sleep tonight and say, all right, tomorrow this is how it's going to be. Let's go.
Exactly.
There's no magic wand, but there's definitely little steps to take over time to start getting used to it. So let's try this for a second. So I know that quite a few people who listen in right now, I've actually gotten to Skype with a few of them. Some of them are actually about ready to quit their jobs. They want to follow what they really want to do. How could they leverage their story of quitting their job? Because I do this quite often. I used to work at the Apple store in Apple retail, and I oftentimes tell people that, somebody came in one day with a broken phone and they had it. I mean, they caused a scene in front of like 200 people, packed store, and I just kind of stood there because, this is normal for me, right? But I just had this moment of, are you done yet? And that's when my decision kind of came in, and I was just like, all right, this is it. Like, this is done. And I tell a lot of people that story because it resonates with them. They understand it. They've been at that point in their job where they're just so done with everything. So how could we leverage telling the story of, perhaps leaving our job when we're fresh as an entrepreneur? We can't go and say we've been doing this for 10 or 15 or 20 years because, maybe I just quit my job working for some accounting firm and I'm becoming a photographer. So I have no real world experience. How can I at least make people realize I'm a genuine person and trustworthy person?
I think that there is something that especially if you hang out with other entrepreneurs, you forget how aspirational the quit your job story is. Like, I'm sure when you tell your friends that work in normal jobs, they're always like, I wish I could do what you do. And I think if you can just use that to your advantage, we start to think it's so commonplace. We start to think it's so normal. It's not. Not everyone quits their job. Most people don't. They check the boxes. They follow the rules. So I think if you can demonstrate the connection between why you quit your job, why you do what you do today, and like why you were so called to it, and like here's the thing. Experience, I think we're past the point with experience where you have to have this big 10,000 hours. Like, you have people that are 16 years old that are more insanely talented on YouTube than you could ever imagine, and they don't have 10,000 hours. So I think, if you're not experienced, it's factual. It's not something you need to apologize for, because obviously you're going to figure out how to make it work, and you will gain the experience as you go. And if the only story you have is the I quit my job, make it juicy.
Make it juicy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So this can really become almost like our new brand. I mean, I could be the unemployed employee in a sense. Like, my brand could be, I'm the unemployable employee. Maybe people can't employ me. How can we use this in our branding and in our marketing? So, maybe in logos or in our taglines or just in who we are on social media. How can we go about using that?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, here it's going to depend on your audience. It's going to depend on things. Like, would say if you were, for example, if you were, doing videography, if you really wanted to go after a lot of corporate clients, I would never use the word unemployable. Because unemployable within the entrepreneur circles is like, yes, I'm unemployable. To a corporate client, it's going to seem like, whoa, they're a deadbeat.
Right, because I have 600 employees.
Exactly. No one will give them a job. So think about the context of who you're serving. I mean, if you're a wedding photographer, no one cares that you're unemployable. Maybe you care that this person has so much creative vision and so much passion that they quit their jobs so they could do this full time. And they are wholly dedicated to making sure your wedding photos are the best possible thing ever. So that context for where you're operating, for my clients, they really like that I've had a business a long time, and I play that up because they're like, well, she's been around this long, she must be good. So use the context of what your market needs to hear from you and what your audience is really looking for.
So we've heard a lot about telling our stories, but now I'd be interested in hearing from you. So I'm curious, what do you love the most about what you do and about your business?
Oh my gosh, I love so many things. I think, here's the things. I will never deny the fact that I'm the boss. I like the fact that I never have to ask for vacation leave. Like, these are things that everyone loves, but I really love them because I used to always be so scared when I put in my vacation leave. I'd be like, please don't say no, I've already booked the plane ticket. I got a good deal. I'm going to Europe. But I think it's, ultimately for me is I really love my clients and how I'm able with the marketing, with the work we're doing to really transform them from point A to point B. When I can see through for example, my story distillery, which is a one-on-one product, when I can see where they walked in and where they walk out with me, and then the transformation that happens with how they tell their story and what they're doing in their business, that gets me really, really excited. When a client emails me and says, I just want to let you know I applied what we did and I've had the highest traffic on a blog post I've ever had, that to me is rewarding because ultimately money's nice, but money doesn't keep you warm at night.
Very true. So Story Distillery, what is this?
So Story Distillery is essentially, I have distilled many, many years of sitting in boardrooms and on the phone working with people on their story. And I've created a 4-part process where essentially we look at 4 different types of stories. Stories that your customers need to hear and understanding what conversations you're going to be part of and where you fit in the market. I think a lot of times we tend to figure out a story and show up and go, dun, da, 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 here I am. And it's like, no. Again, going to that context. Then we look at, what is your personal story, your backstory, how do all these pieces get together, the results and credibility you have, and really talking about the things you do for your clients, the results you get them. And the last part I call bold and brazen, where we really talk about things within your industry, whether you're a chef or a wedding photographer or a coach. What are things within your industry that you feel strongly need to change, that you want to stand up for, that you want really, you feel passionate. I really don't like that word passionate because passion is so overused, but the things that you feel most called to be talking about. So we go through that entire process as a one-on-one service. And by the end, they come out and they have like a really good, strong game plan for how to actually use stories in their business.
And how long is that process from start to finish, at least until you can provide them with the like, here's what you need to do?
Start to finish, Story Distillery is about 2 weeks. So pre-work, call, Maggie goes away, lives, breathes, eats your story, and at the end, here's your handbook, and you're ready to rock and roll.
Very cool. Well, I think I actually have a couple people to talk to you later about, because I know some
Awesome.
people who would probably be interested in that. So, you love your clients. You love what you're doing. What's that?
I really, really do. I'm not just saying it.
So what do you love about your life outside of work? Because there's an important balance to make sure that you're taking care of your business, but you're also taking care of yourself.
Well, first and foremost, I mean, I'm a mom, so I love my little 10-year-old and my husband. Like, my family is the reason I quit my job and the reason I actually jumped out of the plane like I did and never went back to work after my maternity leave. So, I mean, really, that's what drives me. I love traveling. We're huge, huge travelers. I love my garden. I love books. I love Netflix. I love wine. I love maple syrup. That's about it.
Well, that's why you're a distiller. You love wine and you love maple syrup.
Yeah, pretty much. That's where that theme kind of got picked up.
So in sharing your story with the world, in sharing other stories with the world, I have to imagine that your quality of life has changed since you started this journey, because you're learning a lot about a ton of other people. You're learning a lot about yourself. Maybe talk just a little bit about your quality of life and maybe where you were, let's say, 10 years ago compared to now.
Oh my gosh, 10 years ago, my quality of life was horrible because I had a very small child. I was very sleep deprived. But I think in terms of my quality of life, like, I don't really believe in work-life balance. I believe in like more of this harmony. And I think starting out in my business and being a mom of a really small child, like I just had nothing left in me. And the difference now is I'm working with clients who energize me and that I genuinely like as people. And that makes it, there's just so much more personal gratification that goes on. And then I can see that like how what I'm doing impacts my son's view on the world. And like, just, yesterday I took the day off because I wanted to hang out with him. So those little tiny things all add up to a much better, happier, healthier approach to life. Like my friends who haven't seen me for a while since I started making changes in my business, they're like, you're different. You're like more sparkly or something.
But they're probably jealous.
Yeah, they were jealous of me before, but now they're really jealous because not only am I like self-employed and thriving, I'm also like really insanely happy. It's kind of gross to them, I think, and annoying.
There's nothing wrong with being insanely happy, though.
Yeah,
so
I am insanely happy. It's a little worrisome at times, I'm sure, for some people.
Do you have any books or maybe any mentors that you recommend listening to that have perhaps just helped you learn some things, whether it's about yourself or in helping your clients?
I actually have it right here. This book here, how.
Oh my gosh, that's literally in front of me right now. Wow.
This 2 years ago, when I decided to change my business, I took the How to Fascinate test. It changed my perspective on myself so much and when I shared this with people, like my actual test results, they were like, it is so you. So instead of being all these things, like I know now, like innovation is a driving force for me. And I've gone the reason I have this on my desk right now is I actually just did certification with Sally and her team because I believe so much in this process and I use it with my clients. I think there's something really powerful about learning how the world sees you versus how you are internally. How the world sees you is very different than what's going on up here. So I really think that this is like a fundamental book everyone needs to read. So that's How the World Sees You by Sally Hogshead. And take the fascination test. It's like $37. I'm not selling anything here. I'm not giving an affiliate link. I just think it's really, really important to kind of get that outside perspective and kind of rejig what you might be thinking.
It's really cool that you have that on your desk because ironically, that is the book I'm using to hold up the tripod for my camera right now. And the reason why it is the book I'm using to hold up my tripod for my camera is because it is a constant reminder that this is the next book on my list to read after I finish the current one that I'm on. So I'm actually diving into that one next. It's really cool to see that that's been an important thing for both you and your clients, because I'll be jumping into that very soon here. So for everyone watching, the name of that book, I will actually write it into our show notes on our website with a link to Amazon for you, right on our site at www.yearofpurpose.com. A lot of people listen in both on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube. This kind of goes out into a bunch of different places. So if you guys are listening right now, definitely check out the website because I will be posting a link to that. It has been awesome talking to you, Maggie. What are some of the ways for people to get in touch with you if they want to check out your distillery program or anything else that you do?
Probably the best place is always my digital home, which is MaggiePatterson.com. That's Patterson with 2 T's. And you will find me on Twitter tweeting, sharing my life in 140 characters or less.
Good deal. Well, thanks so much for being here today. I hope that the weather is getting warmer by you guys very soon. And I would love to chat with you more maybe next time on the Year of Purpose podcast. Thanks for being here. You've probably heard me talk about designing a life that you actually want to live. You might have even heard about my travels or experiences and thought to yourself, yeah, I do want to do that. Eventually, someday I'll probably do it. And my guess is that you've been thinking about doing it for a long time. So I want to tell you this. Stop thinking. Your time is right now. You don't need any more time. You don't need any more info. You don't need to keep putting it off and planning for the perfect time, because the truth of the matter is this. You could be the person who sits around and thinks about living a better life, or you can be the person that decides that today is the day that you're going to actually do it, and I want that for you. Because you already have what it takes. You've got a fire inside. Even if you can't see it right now, it's lit, but you need to open yourself up to the possibilities and throw a couple logs into the flames. So join me and the Year of Purpose tribe by subscribing to our YouTube channel and iTunes podcast. And if you really like us, please leave a review. This is Effin Moses Blacksburg, and I can't wait to see you again on the Year of Purpose podcast.